for joining us. What role did the American government, either the State Department, the CIA, or other intelligence assets, or even the military, and what role did the Israelis play in the fall of Assad?
Well, the answer is we don't know right now. I mean, this is literally something that took the world by surprise. I know that President Biden went out and made a presentation where he took credit for this. There's no doubt we've known for some time that the United States has been providing financial support for anti-Assad forces, both based out of Jordan and based in Idlib and operating out of Turkey. Turkey's been also underwriting the HTS terrorists. I mean, I know people are calling them other, but they're terrorists. They're head choppers. Jolani. I just want to remind people that the man who's currently sitting in Damascus at the head of what passes for a government in Syria started his career as an Al-Qaeda terrorist in Iraq, killing Americans. And then he went to Syria and he was a deputy to al-Baghdadi of ISIS, and he was part of that whole ISIS thing. Donald Trump, you were supposed to have beat him. Remember, I killed all ISIS. Well, there he is. Jolani's back. He's now, head of, Al-Qaeda, became al-Nusra. Now it's HTS. And now he's raised the black flag over Damascus.
Let me just interrupt you for a minute. So a human being who cuts off the heads of those who disagree with them, and on whose head is a bounty posted by the United States State Department, has been supported by United States intelligence assets, lauded by the President of the United States, and now is at the head of this government.
Correct. Or what passes for a government. There's still there isn't a government in Syria right now, but he has claimed the mantle of government. And it's worse because CNN, which is supposed to be a news media outlet, and I'll tell you, dating back to 2002, they work hand in glove with the U.S. government to put out a U.S. government narrative. I was in the war room of CNN in the fall of 2002 as they prepared for the invasion of Iraq, which wasn't going to take place until March of 2003. The United States hadn't committed to it, hadn't told Congress about it, hadn't gone to the United Nations, but the U.S. government certainly had gone to CNN and said, we're going to invade Iraq, get ready to shape the narrative for us. CNN sent a reporter who sat down with Jolani and did just the greatest whitewash you've ever seen. And that was done with the permission of the U.S. government. The CIA and CNN, again, I know this firsthand because I was there when it happened, they collude on shaping narratives. And this is definitely a CIA operation where I told CNN, go in there. We need you to whitewash this guy. You need to make him look clean because otherwise he has the blood of so many victims that he personally has beheaded and ordered to behead. He is literally a head chopper, but he's the guy in charge. The U.S. government has been supporting him, supporting HTS, supporting these other Islamist fundamentalists. Al-Qaeda, that's the only thing I can tell you right now is that a large proportion of these people who flowed in to get rid of the Assad regime are Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda derivatives. They're the ones who attacked us on 9/11. Maybe not these people, but that mentality, that organization, and we're backing them now, and we've put them in control of Syria after we committed American forces to drive them out of Iraq and Syria from 2014 to 2020. We've now surrendered to Al-Qaeda and given them Syria, and now they have their eyes on Iraq. They're talking about making the caliphate that we said we didn't want to be made, but now it's politically convenient. The United States played a role, Turkey played a role, Israel played a role, but here's my take on this. Nobody expected this to happen. And the reason why I can tell you I believe that is the chaos. There is no orderly transition. There is no identified government. Jolani came in because HTS started what was supposed to be a limited attack in the Idlib area, basically to capture some highways that the Syrian government, together with the Russians, had taken from them back in 2020, to recapture those and solidify their position. And as they pushed in, the Syrian army evaporated. So they kept pushing. The Syrian army evaporated. They went into Aleppo. The Syrian army evaporated. So HTS just said, keep going. And they kept going, and there was not any resistance. And then behind them, the Syrian National Army was sitting there. They weren't part of this original offensive. And so they go, hey, guys, we got to get ginned up and let's get going. Everything that's happened since then is reactive in nature. It's not part of a proactive plan, carefully coordinated. Down south, they weren't prepared for this. The operations center that operates out of Jordan, they had to assemble their forces, and then they sort of slowly went in and were surprised that there was no resistance. Next thing you know, they're thrusting into Dara, moving to Damascus. This took everybody, including the militants, the terrorists, the operatives, the opposition that succeeded in overthrowing Assad, took everybody by surprise. Nobody anticipated this happening. So the key question is, how did this happen? I mean, and this is the great unknown. You know, Russia and Iran have a heavy presence in Syria, and they're not stupid people. They've had their thumb on the pulse of Syria since 2014, 2015. It was Qasem Soleimani, the Al-Quds Force commander, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard commander, who went to Moscow in the summer of 2015 and pleaded for Russia to intervene. And in September 2015, the Russians came in, and together, the Russian Air Force, the Iranian leadership, Iranian forces and proxies propped up the Syrian army. And in several years' time, they won an impressive victory, liberated the territory around Damascus, and drove the jihadists, al-Nusra Front and others, out of mainstream Syria into Idlib, where they were sort of hemmed in there, and that's where they've been hemmed in ever since. The problem comes with the Syrian government and the Syrian army. This goes back to 2000 when Bashar al-Assad took over. He took over a rotten edifice. The Ba'athist regime, the generals, the governors were all very corrupt. His father was a failing leader, failing in his ability to ascertain. So people around him stepped in and they started to enrich themselves. When Bashar al-Assad came in, one of the first things he did is shut down the corrupt general that was running the Syrian operation in Lebanon. And he actually moved to pull the Syrian troops out. That almost cost him his life, because in doing that, he disrupted not only the economy of the corrupt generals and governors, but the economy of Syria, which isn't an economy. It's just this corrupt edifice. And so he had to slow down. And now this war came, and he can't afford to shake up his power base. And so he has to let the generals and the governors do what they do, which is enrich themselves. And once the fighting stopped and things settled down, these people, instead of preparing for war, enriched themselves. And this, it gets worse when you have sanctions. You know, the United States has put the Caesar sanctions on and all other sanctions on Syria. Everybody who knows this, and I saw this firsthand in Iraq, when you sanction an economy, the first thing that happens is you get a black market economy. And that's an economy off the books. And in Syria, the economy that already existed was a corrupt economy. Now the sanctions come in and it becomes an even more corrupt economy, where the generals, the governors, the civil servants are all making money. Nobody's focused on doing their job. Everybody's focused on how much money they can make, how they can consolidate their wealth. And they stopped training, they stopped organizing, they stopped doing anything. And so what looked like it was supposed to be a solid military of around 200,000 was a house of cards. Apparently the Russians knew this. In 2018, the Russians approached Assad and said, you have to reform this from the bottom up. Our generals are telling us that this system isn't going to work. We won this battle because of our Air Force, Iranian leadership, and the sacrifice of 4,000 pro-Iranian proxies. But now you have to take over. You have to reform. But Assad couldn't, because to reform the military meant that he had to change the power base, and he wasn't confident enough in his ability to step forward and do that. So he pushed the Russians back, and the Russians were very frustrated. The Iranians attempted to come in and do the same thing, but they ran into a problem too. The Russians had said, we don't want, they told the Iranians, you came in, you helped solve the situation. Now you have to go home. Syria cannot become an outpost of Iran. The Israelis don't want it. The Americans don't want it. The Turks don't want it. And we don't want to be in the middle of this geopolitical nonsense. We came in to stabilize Assad, not promote the greater Iranian axis of resistance empire. And so there was Russian pushback, but there was also Syrian pushback, because the Iranians come in, they are very ideologically motivated. They put up the posters of Qasem Soleimani and Khamenei, and then Hezbollah comes in, Iranian proxy puts up Hassan Nasrallah, and the Sunnis, who are the majority population in Syria, are resentful of this. And so the Iranians also had to take a step back. That meant that the two entities that propped up Israel or Syria and helped them win in 2017 to 2020 aren't playing a role. And when HTS attacked the other day, they came in, and what was supposed to be a brick wall that they were supposed to chip at, they touched it. It turned out to be a deck of cards. They hit it, and the whole thing collapsed, took everybody by surprise.
President-elect Trump has said over the weekend in a typical hyperbolic way, but maybe there's some credibility to it, that the reason Syria fell is its principal benefactor let it go. And he identified the principal benefactor as Vladimir Putin.
This is an absolute total. This is part and parcel of the whole narrative that the United States tries to portray, that Russia is weak, that the Russian economy isn't as strong as it needs to be, the military is not as strong as it needs to be, that Russia's overextended in Ukraine and therefore unable to do anything else. I would just throw it back at Donald Trump and say, so you're telling me, Donald Trump, that because the United States fled Afghanistan in the most humiliating fashion in August 2021, that means that we're overextended and broke and we don't have anything that works anymore. And you know that's an absolute lie. We left Afghanistan because it was untenable. It was untenable because of the political reality of what was happening on the ground that had, taken place over 20 years. But it's not a reflection. It's a reflection of bad policy, but it's not a reflection of the overall weakness of the United States. What happened in Syria is a reflection of bad decision making, not so much by the Russians, but by Assad. Horrible decision making. Even when things calmed down, if you remember this past summer, Assad was doing all the tours all around the Gulf Arab states. What was he doing? He was getting the money to come in and rebuild. But that money was coming in and it was going into the pockets of corrupt generals, corrupt politicians. It wasn't going to rebuild Syria. It just was a way to further enrich. And this, I'm still doing some digging right now. I'm just running with an idea. I think that influx of money was controlled by the CIA, controlled by the Israelis, controlled by the Turks. What I mean by that is that they colluded with the benefactors in the Gulf Arab states to flood Syria with money, but made sure it got into the pockets of the corrupt people. And maybe a certain number of those people were bought off and told, when the time comes, you need to go, here's the money, go get your house and all that kind of stuff. I can't say that that's absolutely certain, but I can say that all this money that was flooding in and being promised wasn't going to rebuild Syria. It was going straight into the pockets of the corrupt generals and the corrupt governors who were already corrupt and destroying Syria. And Bashar al-Assad had to be living in a fantasy land not to be aware of this. Either he was aware of this and was as corrupt as they are, which I don't believe, or he was sequestered and surrounded by people who led him to believe that everything's okay and don't worry about it. We got this under control, boss. And they didn't. And now he's fled with his family to Moscow.
Talk to us about Turkish President Erdogan and the role of Turkey in all of this. I mean, is he still on speaking terms with Vladimir Putin?
Oh, they'll always be on speaking terms. Turkish President Erdogan is the president of Turkey. He's an important regional leader. I can't speak to what's inside Vladimir Putin's mind, but I do know that there's an element of frustration in the Russian government towards the Turks. They, after all, continue to say that Crimea is Ukraine and that the territories that Russia has brought in through referendum have to be returned to Ukraine. That's not going to happen. And they operate in a way that does not suit Russia's interests, but Russia is their neighbor. They collaborate where they can collaborate. Turkey clearly was operating in bad faith with the Astana agreements. I mean, everybody knew that to begin with because HTS continued to be funded. But the question was, what do you do about HTS? I saw in your comment, I'm not supposed to read your comments, but I read them. Ritter has to apologize for being wrong for the last 2 weeks. Dude, I ain't going to apologize. You don't know what intelligence analysis is. You operate with the data you have. You
Right.
make the best assessments that you can with that data. And when the data changes, you redo your assessment. I got it wrong. The CIA got it wrong. MI6 got it wrong. The whole world got it wrong. Nobody called this. Not a single person called this. It came out of the blue. And now I, like everybody else, woke up in the morning and went, whoa, the whole world has changed. And I'm trying to get my head around it, but I'm not going to apologize. I gave
why is the White House and the State Department and the deep state crowing over this? Why are they happy?
Well, because this has been a goal and objective of the United States and Israel. If you go back after 9/11, General Wesley Clark, gave his famous speech where he talked about, the 7 nations that were going to fall. Syria was supposed to be number 2 after Iraq. And if you look at the war plans, and Seymour Hersh has written about this, after Baghdad fell, we surged a military force up towards Al Qaim and then out of Tikrit, and we were going to go into Syria to overthrow Bashar al-Assad, but then the instability in the south and in the north prohibited that, so we had to pull back. But we wanted Bashar al-Assad gone. We have viewed him for the longest time as a linchpin of the anti-American establishment in the region, and we've been pushing to topple him from day one. The whole 1912 or 2012 up until now, this whole unrest thing is something that Turkey, the United States, and Israel has been promoting. We have had an anti-Assad, policy in place, and now he's gone. So of course we're cheering, but that's like cheering the death of Muammar Gaddafi. Syria, unless there's something going on that I don't understand, Syria is going to devolve into Libya worse. The sectarian violence is going to be horrific. These head chopping jihadists they haven't changed their colors. I got in trouble last night. I did a book event last night, and even though it was about the INF treaty, somebody asked me a question about Syria because, of course, it's on everybody's mind. And I mentioned, I said the black flag of Islam, of jihad, is now flying over Baghdad. And this lady came up afterwards and she was furious at me. She said the black flag of Islam's not there. And I said, well, who's Jolani? She said, no, he's just temporary. It's the Syrian National Army. And she showed me the flag, which is basically the flag of French colonial Syria, but they've adopted it, 3 green stars and stripes on a white field. And I said, that's a CIA flag. You do know that we funded that. That has nothing to do with Syria, and it's not flying. The black flag is flying, and the black flag and this flag don't get along. And every time they fought in the past, the black flag has beaten this flag. These people cheering in the streets have this notion that, ding dong, the witch is dead, the wicked witch, and they're running around cheering. They don't understand that whatever you want to call Assad, he's gone. But what has replaced him is a nightmare. This is going to be a debacle for Syria. And again, from our perspective, this is good. This is what I've tried to tell people from day one. America doesn't care about Syrian people, about Lebanese people, about Iraqi people, about Iranian people. Our job is to facilitate chaos in regions that we don't control. And right now, we, together with Israel and Turkey, are trying to break the back of the axis of resistance, which was Iranian controlled, but had been stiffened by the Russians. And it looks like we have succeeded, whether it is because we react to a situation that developed or whether it was by some strategic design that has yet to be articulated. We succeeded. Bashar al-Assad's gone. With it goes the Syrian land bridge between Iran and Hezbollah. Hezbollah is now isolated in Lebanon. They claim to have enough weapons to be able to continue resistance, but they're not going to get resupplied. And the other thing is this whole dynamic has changed. Israel now, who was defeated 2 weeks ago, literally, nobody's going to. I know people are saying it was a big Israeli scheme. They were planning. This was all that. No,